This is the Reluctant Leader podcast, the podcast designed to help you if you've landed a leadership role through no fault of your own and now need to find out what you should be doing. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and have been there and know what it feels like and made all the mistakes. In each episode, I'll be getting to grips with a leadership topic by interviewing an expert in their field. You'll find out why they do what they do and take away some top tips you can use to become a more confident leader. For more content and to keep in touch with how the project is developing, go to www.thereluctantleader.co.uk. If you have any comments about the episode, you'll find me on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter. So let's crack on with the show. Today I'm talking to Sarah Matyjasik of SM Power, creating strength from the inside out. After 10 years in commercial recruitment and operational management, Sarah's career led her into health and fitness when she had children, and she took the opportunity to follow her real passion. Sarah has started, built and run a number of businesses, as well as coaching and mentoring individuals and teams of people, both in business and in wellbeing. She is a qualified coach, nutrition advisor and personal trainer. Sarah has worked with dozens of successful professionals whose success has often come at a cost to their health and wellness, sometimes with significant impact on their relationships and their work or career. She now runs SM Power, a company which specialises in helping businesses and the people who work within them to improve their health and wellness and develop sustainable energy so that they can work at their optimum and contribute the best of themselves to their life and work. I hope you enjoy this chat we had about avoiding burnout, and I'll catch you all on the other side. Sarah, welcome to the Reluctant Leader podcast.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
We're going to be talking about avoiding burnout, which is important. I know a lot of people that have probably not put their health and all the other bits and pieces to one side and concentrating on the business, and then woke up one day and suddenly realised, actually, I've got things a bit unbalanced. And I think it's a really great thing that you do, and it's a really important message. But before we go down that route, the first thing that I always ask my guests is, why do you do what you do? And what was that pivotal moment that took you down this path?
Sure. Well, I mean, Mark, I've always had an interest in health and fitness in general. And I suppose probably it started way back, really, my story and why I've come about doing what I do. And probably started almost in my late teens, really. My dad became ill with cancer. And really at that point, 20 odd years ago, it was quite unheard of to be on a kind of a strict diet with healing foods, etc. And that kind of intrigued me and started my interest around vitamins, minerals, what they do for us, what they do inside our bodies. And I embarked really then on my first nutrition course way back in my late teens, and I really got into weight training as well. So I was always really into health and fitness, but fast forward many years in between, with a busy career in recruitment and operational management, a family to run, husband, 2 teenagers. It was probably at that point where it was the busiest time in my life, really, that I discovered I was out of balance, and actually I couldn't quite carry on as I was. And I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, juggling all those balls, and particularly being in a busy career as well. My fitness had slipped. I wasn't really doing anything much for myself. I wasn't focused on myself at all. It was all about my career and my family. And it was in about 2015 when I decided to set a really big goal, and I started competing in figure fitness bodybuilding, which is random, I know, and it's not necessarily that I'm saying other people would want to do that, but it was really the beginning of a big journey for me to understand and learn a lot about body, a lot about fitness, a lot about how we operate on a wider scale from our brain right the way through to our physical fitness and what we put inside our bodies, and also how I discovered really that by doing that and actually not only achieving, a fantastic goal, I'd achieved it, I'd got on stage, I'd competed, and not only once, but over 6 times over 3 years. But actually I realized that it had essentially made me out of balance again. And it was then, I suppose, that I discovered there was 4 key areas that I needed to look at. And that's where the strength model that I work with today has come about. So for me at that point, it was very much nutrition was out of balance. My health had kind of gone downhill again. I didn't feel particularly fit and healthy again. And my relationships, lifestyle and family had really kind of taken a bit of a down. Well, it wasn't too bad. It was just really essentially putting them on hold. And obviously that's not really a healthy thing to do. And our relationships are a really important part of our lives. Obviously I didn't put the children on hold. It was more the sort of family in general. So it's really led me to believe that the key to success in life and business is really what we do with and what we put in our bodies.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying a lot of what you just said will resonate with an awful lot of people, because I think that a lot of the time we just get just focused on what we think is important, and then realize later on actually the things that are really important we probably haven't been doing. So, when you decided to get more into this and focus on something, what was the first thing you did when you decided to go down this path to offer this to these people that are sort of trying to avoid burnout? Because ultimately, this is what we're talking about: it's avoiding that happening. So, it's putting things in place to stop that happening.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think from my learning and understanding now of what I've gone through over many years, like, we sort of bumble along and keep going, is that I try to help people understand mindfully what is actually happening in their life and do, because sometimes we're so busy being busy in our lives that we don't really take any notice of what physically is happening to us. And I often find people sometimes wake up and sometimes don't. So when I work in workshops and keynotes and I'm teaching people in that sort of situation, they might then think about these things. But actually, sometimes when clients come to me, they've already got those ailments and issues that they're saying, oh, this is happening to me, that's happening to me. How can I start to change things? And we start to look across body, brain, nutrition and nurture, which are the four key strength elements. And we really delve into what's happening, how they're thinking on a daily basis. What are they doing to improve the way that they think? We look at their nutrition. So what are they putting into their bodies? How are they feeding themselves? Are they eating whole foods? Are they drinking 2 litres of water plus? Are they looking after themselves in that sense? And then we look at nurture and body as well, physical exercise and well-being. So we cover, I really sort of delve into those areas with them. And it's quite a process really. And it can be a bit of a slow process at the beginning, because it's important to get these things right. Because what I discovered, personal training clients and working with people on a fitness level, is that is really just one tiny part of a much bigger picture, which is discovering why people are doing it. Because when you discover what it is that it's giving you and what it's doing for you, you will continue to do it. It's what we call intrinsic motivation. We will continue to do something we believe is having a positive effect on us. So it's important to work on those background bits. What is the purpose? What level of ownership are you taking of your own health? What weaknesses are there? What kind of boulders and obstacles are in the way? Is it family? Is it work? How can we get around those obstacles to ensure that you can still live and lead a healthy life?
One thing you said there was finding something that actually you enjoy doing, and when you are, the strange thing about fitness and energy is that when you're tired, then you feel you need to relax and not do any exercise, but then you get into a rut, and this is, I'm referring to me actually, and that you tend not to do any exercise because you think I need to rest. But what I've noticed recently is I've just got into HIIT training, so the high intensity interval training, for those that don't know what that is, and I sort of discovered it by accident really. But what I've found is that it expels a lot of energy, but what it does then gives you more energy, which is weird, isn't it? Because you think, well, I'm using energy, but how do I get more energy? What is that actually happening within our body when we actually use energy, but then it gives us energy? There's a number of things there, actually. There's a number of things there, I believe, actually, Mark. First of all, how we feel inside, our spirit, our soul, our inner energy has a massive impact on our external energy. So energy doesn't just come from our food, it comes from many sources. And I believe we get energy and resilience, which is part of the POW program, the ER part, from body, brain, nutrition, nurture, all being in balance. So when you've done that HIIT training, it may be that it's made you feel amazing, because you've done it, so if you've not procrastinated, you've actually got up and done it. That's made you feel really good about yourself. So you've done something positive. You've actually increased your circulation. You've increased in fact, there's a really good book called Spark, and it's essentially explaining how exercise improves the performance of our brain. So because you've released happy hormones, you've increased that level of positivity in your brain.
You've also increased your circulation, increased cellular growth, you've increased new brain cells, you've changed neural pathways by doing that. So now next time you do it, it's going to feel a bit easier. So by getting up and doing exercise, it is profoundly important on our brain. And actually that book suggests that it's most important for our brain, and actually body composition and our body fitness is a secondary to exercising. The brain is the first part. So there's lots of ways in which we get energy, and not only exercise, but actually nurture. And this is an area that most people don't even know what it means and certainly don't practice it. And it can mean lots of things, lots of different things to lots of different people, really. It depends on what floats your boat and what makes you feel a sense of peace and re-energizing inside. For some people, it's putting our feet on the sand on a beach. For other people, it's walking in the woods. There's all sorts of ways in which we can increase our nurture. And that's one of the aspects I work on hugely, because lots of people don't think about that at all. They don't give themselves time to regenerate inside. And that, like I said, it doesn't just come from food or even sleep. I mean, those would be the two common things that people think energy comes from, is our food and our sleep.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, actually, because it's when you mention like just putting your feet on sand and going into the sea, it does enliven you and gives you that energy, doesn't it? And it's never really thought of it like that, so that's really interesting.
Sure, and that. I was going to say that fills up something that we can't tangibly put our hands on. It's that inner feeling. It's that what I call kind of spirit and energy. And there's not really particularly anything religious about it. I'm not meaning it from that point of view, but it's that inner energy that when we feel we've slept really well, we've eaten really well, but we just can't. We feel like we're treading treacle, or we're sort of trudging through mud. It's that feeling inside where we feel drained and tired out. That is the nurture aspect. That's when you're lacking the nurture.
And I suppose it's tuning into what it is for you, because it's going to be different for everybody, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So you mentioned your power program, and briefly a while ago, but I think it's a good opportunity now just to go through what that program is and what the elements of it and how that works.
Yeah, sure. So the Power Program is essentially a program of change or a program of evolving somebody from a position of usually some form of weakness to taking them right the way through to strength. So I call it from stress to strength, really. So somebody who's in a bit stressed out situation doesn't really know how to go from A to B. Where do I start? We start with purpose, and that's the P of the power. So looking at what it is that is going to change. What is it that's really going to make you do this? So what is it that means so much to you at the moment that's going to make you power through this program and actually change your health? Because in some ways, sometimes when we're feeling a bit low mentally, it's easier just to stand still and not to do anything about it. So we're trying to discover what that purpose is and what's going to keep you going when times get tough. Because of course, things are going to come back at us like they are doing in your current moment. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to look at the level of ownership you've got and what kind of is in the way of that. How can we increase that level of ownership? And that comes down to purpose as well, because you'll take more ownership and you'll be more motivated intrinsically when you've got a strong purpose and a why. And it's said, isn't it, that no matter how hard that when your why is really strong, it doesn't matter how hard that how is. You'll endure it, won't you, to get to that why. So that why is really important. And then we look at what weaknesses there are. So what kind of things might come up in the way, whether it's a career thing, whether it's a family thing, whether it's a health reasons, all sorts of things that people have as a weakness. And then we look at tackling that. So those are usually limiting beliefs. So we look at what are those beliefs, what do you believe, and how can we look at that differently and reframe that and choose a different way of thinking. Because actually, in fact, a client said it to me the other day. She said, it's made such a difference looking at things differently. I read that limited belief and then I change it around and I put the empowering belief in, and just by doing that as a habit every single day, it starts to change those neural pathways, the way we think about situations, our perception of something. So that's really important to do that background stuff before you even get to doing the fitness element and the nutrition and how we actually going to get our bodies fitter. From the brain perspective, it's really important. And then we look at sort of energy and resilience. And those two areas, I cover what's called a strengths model that I've developed from all the experience I've had and all the different qualifications and people I've worked with and the clients and the stories I've had. And the strengths model involves 4 key strength elements, and that is our body. So essentially use it or lose it. If we don't use it, we're going to lose it. Our muscles deteriorate, our body deteriorates our flexibility, everything, if we don't use it. So how active are we on a daily basis? What do we do on a daily basis to make our bodies move and increase our circulation, encourage the need for a strong metabolism? So do we actually use our food, or do we just store it because we sit down all day? There's lots of research actually out there that the negative effects of sitting for 6 or 7 hours a day in front of a computer can actually be negated by doing about 60 minutes of activity. And that doesn't have to mean going to a gym. That could mean taking the stairs a few times a day, walking about to the shops, or getting off the bus a few stops earlier. All sorts of ways we can increase our activity levels. Brain, so what you think about your brain about, essentially how good our brain functions will be the results that we get throughout our day. So do we choose the way that we want to think on a daily basis? Do we choose the day that we want to have set out in front of us? Do we praise ourselves for the good things that happen in our day? Or is it kind of easier to believe the negative person on your shoulder telling you that things aren't so good? So, how well do we improve our brain? Do we read things that improve us, personal development books, etc.? Do we play brain games that improve our flexibility of our brain? So how serious are we about getting good quality sleep? And if you really look into the way that sleep affects our brain, it's massively important for us to sleep, not only in terms of quantity of hours, but quality.
Yeah, I just I've just read a book called Why We Sleep, and it's such an eye-opener, actually, the importance of not only getting the rest that we get from sleep, it's actually all the things that happen while we're asleep, and how like you talked about, the neural pathways and all those sort of things. There's a lot of research now that says that actually that's when we're asleep, that's when those things form. So if we're not getting enough sleep, then I guess we're denying our brain to actually change and evolve, isn't it?
Absolutely. So when we sleep, we essentially process memories. So we process emotions. We take the emotions out of whatever's happened in the day, and we store that memory. So if we don't get a chance to do that, that is when people get more and more stressed, because we're filling up essentially our stress bucket. So when we REM, in sort of quick, simple terms, we get rid of those, the stress bucket, we reduce it. So we're going to give ourselves a much better chance of having a better day the next day and waking up feeling refreshed and energized for our day. And likewise, if you are doing some really intense work, it's good to get a good sleep, because you're storing all those memories from what you've done in your work that day. And likewise, if you're doing a course or you're doing something really important, it's good to ensure you get good sleep, so you're waking up fresh with a good mind that can then retain that information for the day too. So yeah, it's really important to get good sleep.
Yeah. It seems obvious, doesn't it? But as with a lot of this stuff, we get so busy that we just, we're not focused on these things that are important. And then, like I say, it catches up with us sooner or later, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure. And also the brain is really sensitive to biochemical changes, nutritional deficiencies and imbalances. And so our diet can have a huge effect on brain chemicals that affect our mood, our behavior, our thought processes, emotional reactions. And a clear example of this is when someone's got hangry because their blood sugars have dropped, and they might come across as short or snappy or moody in their responses. So if you're one of these people who that affects you, it's really important to realize that, because you can have an impact on your colleagues around you. So it's important to make sure your blood sugars don't drop. You perhaps don't have high glycemic foods, which are the high sugary foods. People surviving on coffee and sugars in a day, rather than eating good balanced, complex low glycemic carbohydrates, which give you stable energy. And that can have a huge impact on relationships in work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure. And I'm sure we've all been hangry at some point. I remember the first HIT class that I came out of, I was definitely hangry because my partner was waiting for me. And she said, "What the hell's the matter with you? If you're going to be like that, then I don't want you going anymore." And I said, "Look, I'm just absolutely whacked out. Just give me something to eat." And you don't, the thing is, when that's happening, you just reach for the thing that's nearest. And obviously that might not be the ideal thing to be doing.
No, of course, no.
If you're going to do these things, have a plan and know how you're going to feel and have something ready for that, I guess.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So that's what we work on is trying to get rid of some of these habits that are kind of bad habits really that are formed. And many times over years and years of people just not quite putting any time and effort into, or just not having the energy to think about themselves and actually the impact of what they're doing and how it's having an impact on their health really. So yeah, we look at not only from a brain perspective, but also nutrition. At the end of the day, we are what we eat. So we look at, what people are drinking and eating. So usually I find people aren't drinking enough water. We need about 2 litres a day just for an average adult. If you're doing more exercise or it's hot weather, you need a lot more than that. So there's huge, again, loads of evidence on the effects of dehydration on our performance, our mental performance, but also our physical performance too. So again, water is really, really important for that. The importance of eating whole foods as well. That so many people I come across as well, eating lots of processed foods or foods that are, put in a microwave style, just for their evening meal, even not even just for a lunchtime situation. So I do teach the importance of eating whole foods, and also I help clients to work out, how they can plan and shop for that, and how they can cook for it, how they can produce freezer-based meals, but whole foods. So it makes it easy for them to fit in. Because I appreciate people are busy. You've got to find ways to make this as simple as possible for people to eat as well as possible. Yeah. So yes, teaching them not to live on black coffee and high sugar. I come across that quite a lot.
I'm sure you do. Yeah. And what I'm thinking here, that obviously there's lots of elements you've talked about, and one of the things that we're, as a species aren't very good at is that, it's a classic New Year's Eve, New Year's resolution thing where we put in and think that we can do loads of things, change loads of things all at once, and then ultimately, because it becomes overwhelming, we stop doing those things and end up having, actually back to square one. So how do you manage that? How do you manage the sort of the gradual change? I guess that's what you're working on, gradual changes rather than massive changes all in one go.
So when that happens, I find people have put that all in place, is they probably, or possibly, or most of the time, haven't actually thought about why they're doing it. So that's where the purpose comes back in. So I take them right back to the stage one of, right, why are we actually doing this? What is it going to look like, mean to you? How are you going to feel? What's going to be different? How is your life going to look? How are you going to be different? What are you going to feel like? And really try to get them to understand and put themselves in those shoes of that goal that they've got, whatever it is. And then I find that then, keeping on top of that and working through a process of coaching with them really to ensure and to instill those habits. And once you've got those habits in place, it's like the healthy eating, to be honest. I found that when people have got these habits in place, showing them ways in which they can eat when they get caught out and have to go out for lunch with a client, what kind of things would you pick from the menu? And once you get into those habits of knowing what to do, people just need a bit of that knowledge really, that then it's not necessarily because they don't like eating that way, it's just they've never even thought about it. So when you give them the knowledge and the skills to be able to do it and they form those habits, then often they do stick.
Yeah, and habits and behaviours are so difficult sometimes to change, aren't they? If we're doing something, sometimes when you reach for something, it's almost like it's like part of you, and sometimes it's like to do with the time of day. You get to 11 o'clock and say, "Oh, I haven't had a coffee yet," and you just have a coffee. Not particularly just because you need it; it's just because it's something that you do, isn't it? And I guess that's something that you have to sort of address as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the thing with stimulants, you mentioned coffee and we will address the stimulant side of it, is that people do reach for stimulants when their diet is not in balance. When you have good protein coming in and you have, lower glycemic carbs. So the lower glycemic carbs essentially keep our energy levels more stable. So they're the whole grains, the whole grain pasta, whole wheat pasta, whole grain bread, etc. So all the brown stuff will keep our energy levels much more level. So when that happens and you've got good protein in particular going into each of your meals as well, you find your energy levels are much more stable. You don't reach for stimulants as much. You get out of the habit of needing stimulants in order to keep your day going, because all that does is keep fluctuating your insulin levels and your blood sugar levels, and you keep getting ups and downs throughout the day. And again, that's not good for hormones, particularly working with women in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Our hormones are crucial in that stage of our lives, that we need to keep them as level as possible in order to keep our body composition in check and keep our energy levels in check and our moods, etc. So I do a lot of teaching around stimulants and trying to reduce them hugely. You don't have to cut them out, but reducing them, alcohol particularly as well, especially wine, trying to keep alcohol to a minimum. safe levels for, because government guidelines, but safe levels, drinking a bit at weekends, but not massively, not binge drinking, giving yourself 3 or 4 days where you don't drink alcohol for your liver to recover. It's really important. The liver is doing so much work of all the toxins around us that if we can eliminate some of these extra things that we put on it without ruining the fun I get, then it's really important to do so. But some people, when you realize the impact of reducing things like this and the impact on how you feel when your liver is functioning better and you have more energy, you start to realize what it does for you. You don't think about it as much. You feel more balanced. So you don't feel it's a deprivation that you're not having X amount of alcohol that you would have had before, because you feel that sense of good health, that it's important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. I just want to ask you whether, maybe a story of a client that you've worked with that's just come to you with, I guess they're all similar in some ways, but they're different in other ways. So, what is there a typical sort of story that we talk about when someone comes to you that is in that sort of burnout sort of scenario?
Yeah, I've actually had a number of clients thinking about it that have come to me, particularly with sleeping problems and not wanting to get out of bed in the morning. Quite simply could not wake up, could not get out of bed, bordering sort of autoimmune issues as well. But aside from medical situations, I'm not medically trained. I'm not a doctor or anything. But looking at somebody who's almost trudging through treacle and not being able to get out of bed in the mornings. Those are the kind of stories where I find that people have gone past, they've really gone far enough that they now know there's something not right. I've got to do something about this, rather than the tiny body whispers that you might get leading up to that. So I would, those are the kind of clients I end up working with as well. And I've worked with a number of those and brought them out of that state. And actually one client said to me within, I think it was 5 weeks, she'd started to feel better. She'd already been feeling a little bit more sprightly in the mornings, not jumping out of bed, but a bit more sprightly. And we'd just changed things, like we were looking at some of the sensible nutrition habits. And this isn't a case of taking someone's diet and completely changing it. This is simply taking out and evolving it. And that's where I found most success, is not giving somebody a meal plan, but actually looking at what they now currently eat and just evolving things in that plan. And just exercise, starting now to do some exercise. She wasn't exercising at the time. But again, gradual things, small things. It wasn't a gym. It wasn't necessarily out walking on the road. She wanted to go in a gym. But it was gradual resistance-based exercise. I'm a firm believer in weight training and resistance exercise, especially for women in their 30s and 40s and 50s and beyond, because when we build muscle tissue, we have a different hormonal situation going on. And we also build bone density too, which is important for preventing osteoporosis in the future. So there's all these sorts of things. And that building of just even those tiny bits of using your muscles and starting to build a little bit of muscle tissue and lean tissue starts to create a feeling inside of strength. So I am a firm believer in that when we have stronger muscles, we have a stronger brain, we have a stronger energy, we have a stronger mind. Everything starts to become stronger. And that's what it's done. And that lady has gone on to do amazing things. She's gone over, I've been working with her for about 18 months now. She, within, I think 9 months it was, she'd already lost 2 stone in weight, which was not her goal, I have to add. She points that out. It was her goal to gain energy and to feel fitter and healthier and feel a sense of vitality. And I mean, she's gone way past that. So it's been a brilliant experience. And I've had a number of people who have had extraordinary results like that too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's interesting you say that, actually, because when I started doing this HIIT training, it was about losing weight. But actually, I've not lost weight, but I've actually had lots of feedback from sort of gadgets that actually tell me that my body composition is changing, which is actually probably a better thing, isn't it? Rather than just saying losing weight for the sake of it. Actually, if your weight stays the same, but actually you're in a better physical state, then that's far better, isn't it? Oh,
absolutely. Body composition far outweighs our physical weight. And, I think it's generally out there that we know that muscle weighs more than fat. So at the end of the day, if you've got somebody who's what we call more of a mesomorphic body, which means we hold on to more muscle tissue, we're likely to be a little bit heavier. And you've got different bone structures and things as well. So I think I do teach people right from the beginning, really to try and get away from thinking about weight per se. It is a measure, but I don't think it's a very good measure sometimes for people, especially psychologically. So many women in particular are fixated on weight and sizes, when actually we need to think about how do we look and feel? What do we look like in a mirror? What do we look to ourselves? How do we feel in our own body? When we put clothes on, how does it feel? Do clothes suddenly feel a bit looser? And we've tended to have gone, I tend to work like that with people and trying to get them to think about clothes that they might want to get into rather than thinking about physical weight. And we do look at measurements because that is a level of body composition, your waist to hip ratio, etc. But yeah, body composition and having more lean tissue than fat tissue is, like you said, far more important because that affects our internal organs and what we call our visceral fat, the fat that's all around our organs. So the less you have of that, the better. And you can have somebody who looks essentially slim and, as we might put it, skinny fat, they call it these days, where you might be slim on the surface, but you don't have much muscle tissue. So your body fat percentage is actually quite a bit higher. So you can have somebody who looks bigger, but actually has got a lot less body fat percentage than someone who looks smaller. So absolutely, it's all about composition.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Sadly, Sarah, our time is running out.
Wow.
Yes, I know it's always the way. Just get going, and you think, oh my goodness. But so this is the time, and everyone's prompted that for just to round things up, really, is some top tips for the listeners to sort of take away from what we've been talking about, what that they can maybe introduce maybe straight away. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I've got my 3 top ones I think that are most important. Is the first one is aim for balance. So in all those strength areas, body, brain, nutrition and nurture, don't just work on one thing, work across the 4 things, even if you just find one thing to do in each of those areas. So having an active body, thinking about how you think in terms of brain health, eating well for nutrition, and also playing well for nurture. So we didn't cover nurture in massive detail, but playfulness and fun is really important. And plan these goals as well as you plan your business goals. That's my tip there. Create a morning and evening routine. So I work with clients to make sure they have a great start and a great end to their day, so that you're actually choosing your day rather than being thrown at whatever happens to you in that day. I have like a pick list really from 4 key strength elements that people can sort of build and put together their own personal ideal morning and evening rituals. And also the third one is focusing on nurture, because this is an area we don't focus on enough and don't prioritize, and it is linked to enjoyment, and in turn that produces serotonin, which has a really positive effect on our lives. So fun, laughter, joy, playfulness are all so key to our well-being. So if we have strong supportive relationships and good connections, we increase our happy hormones, and in turn we increase that energy and resilience, that internal energy we talked about earlier. So every moment of fun and playfulness and joy that we experience, I believe I get people to imagine they're putting that into a jar, my resilience jar. And your resilience jar, the fuller it is, the more resilient you become when bad things happen, which, of course, on a daily basis, things come at you, negative stuff, some more dramatic than others. But that resilience jar, the fuller it is, the more you're able to cope with the things that happen to you that you don't want happening to you.
Brilliant. That's a great way of summing things up. And resilience is so important, and it allows us to cope with whatever's thrown at us in day to day. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Sarah. It's been great. It's been a long time in the planning, but we've got it done now, and you've given some fantastic value, and hopefully everyone's listening have taken something away that they can introduce straight away, that is going to avoid the burnout situation, so it doesn't catch up with us. So catch you very soon.
Thank you, Mark. That's been brilliant. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to leave a review. Don't forget to check out the Reluctant Leader project at www.thereluctantleader.co.uk. Make a note to start, stop or continue doing whatever struck a chord in this episode. And until next time, be the best you can be.